Okay guys, so welcome back again. In this video, we'll be seeing that how do we use the Google Identity Platform inside our React application. And this video would be like divided into three parts. Firstly, we would cover that how to set up credentials inside our Google Cloud Console. The second part would be implementing that inside our React project using the Google OAuth library. And in the third part, we'll see that how do we use the identity token provided by Google to validate the request coming from our front-end application to our back-end server application using Express.js. So without wasting any time, let's dive into the first part, that is creating credentials inside our Google Cloud Console. So once you log into Google Cloud Console, and if you haven't created any project, then you would not be seeing this window here, but instead you would be simply seeing here, that is create a new project. But I already have one project here, but for this tutorial, I would be creating a new project. So I'll click here and I'll simply click select this new project. And for this thing, I would be simply giving it a project name, and this can be any project name. It is not client facing. So let's say that Google React sign in. And for the organization, I'm not going to choose any organization. So I would be simply selecting no organization here. And finally, I would be simply clicking on create here, and it would simply create a Google Cloud project for me. And now I need to simply select that project because like I'm logged into my old project here, but you would be logged into the current project which you have just created. So this is the project that is created here. And now what we need to do, we need to go to this thing here, that is API and for services, because we need to set up two things here. That is the OAuth consent screen and the credentials. So firstly, we would be setting up the OAuth consent screen. So let's click on this tab, that is OAuth consent screen. And here you need to choose the user type, that is internal or external. So here I would be simply using external here because I want my application to be available for any user. And now I'll click on create. And here I would say that you need to provide in the client facing app name. So let's say that let's call it Mafia Rocks. Simply like this, that is the name of my application which the clients would see. And then you need to select in your support email. That would be the default email of the currently logged in user inside your Google Cloud Console. And then I would suggest that not to select in the app logo, because if you select in the app logo, then your app needs to be verified. So just leave it as it is until you are going for production. And then you need to add in these optional things here, that is application homepage, privacy policy, and terms of service link. And this is again needed for production builds. And for the authorized domain, just leave it as it is until and unless you are going for production. If you are going for production, then just use in the domain name on which your application is running or the React application is running. And here you need to provide in a developer contact information. So let me simply provide in my email address here. And now let's simply click on save and continue. And now we need to add scopes to our application. That is what all is granted when the user selects this account. So let's click here, add or remove scopes. And here we'll simply select email, profile, and OpenID. And let's click on update here. So now we have these non-sensitive scopes here. And if you're using this application for like calling Google APIs for the current user, then you would need to enter the sensitive scopes. That would be like the calendar API, the Gmail API, or the Drive API. But we are not going to do that because we are only interested in authentication for this tutorial video. And now let's simply click on save and continue. And here we need to add in some test users to test our application. Otherwise, you'll be getting an error. So let's add in a couple of test users here. Let's simply click on add here. So let's click add. And now we have these two users here, which we can use for testing purposes. And now let's simply click on save and continue. And now this is a summary. And now we can simply go back to dashboard. And now we need to go to our credentials tab here. And now we need to create credentials here by clicking here, that is the OAuth 2 client IDs. So create credentials, OAuth client ID. Now we need to choose the application type since we are building a React application. So we would be choosing the web application. So let's select web application. And here we need to give this any name. Again, this is not client facing. So let's simply call it a React app. A React app, simply like this. And make sure that you are following me here correctly, because if you do not add in the authorized JavaScript origins correctly, your application would not run in the browser or it would give you an error in the console. So let's add in a URI here. Since we are developing in localhost, so we would be adding http://localhost. And now we would need to add one more URI, that is on which port our application is running. and that is 5173 in my case, because I am running a Vite application, and by default Vite React application runs on port 5173. If you are using a create React app package to create your React application, then just make sure that you enter the port correctly here, because I guess that on the create React app, the React app runs on port 3000. And when you are going for production, just make sure that you enter the correct domain of your React application. And now we do not need to enter any redirect URLs, because we are not doing that here. That is, we are not redirecting the user anywhere. And now let's simply click on create. So once this is done, we would be having our client ID and client secret. So this is my client ID and client secret. And just don't waste your time copying this client ID and client secret into your projects, because I would be deleting them after this tutorial. So let's copy this code or this client ID for reference. So let's go here, and just don't worry about what this is. We will be coming into this in a moment. And now let me also copy the client secret here. So let's copy this client secret and let me paste it here. So that's all what you need to do inside this Google console, and we have our React app ready here. So now what we are going to do, we are going to go to our VS Code here, because here we have the basic mono repo setup with React as the front-end application, the client application, and the server would be an Express application. And this is set up using a workspaces here inside this package.json file and the root folder of my project. And then the server would contain all the logic for the Express application. As you can see in the app.js file, we have this Express application, basic Express application. And in the client folder, we have the React application using the create Vite app thing here. And now you can go into the source folder to see in the app.jsx file. So this is all basic skeleton stuff here. So now what we need to do, we need to do a couple of things. We would be coming to the server part later on in the video, but now let's focus on to the client application, that is the React application here. So let's try to run this application, and let me do npm run dev, and it would start both the server and the client application. And we see that server application is running on port 4000, and we see awesome, it works. And the client application is on port 5173. And we can see this thing here, that is React Google OAuth authentication client and server. So now the first thing we need to do, we need to use a package here, that is an npm package called React OAuth Google. And make sure you are using this package here, because you would be also implementing Google one-tap sign-in. So let's simply copy the dependency from here, and let's go to our application here. And we need to stop the application just to install the package. Let me clear out, and let me paste in that command here. And I would be simply adding this library to my client package, that is the React application. So therefore I'm providing this flag here, but if you're directly using it inside your React package, then you do not need to provide this workspace client here. So let's press enter, and it would take a couple of seconds to install. If we have a look at the package.json file of the client application, we see that now we have the dependency installed here. And now what we need to do, the first thing we need to do is to go to our main.jsx file, because we need to wrap our application inside the Google provider. So what we'll do, we'll simply import this thing here, that is import something from at React Google OAuth, and we need to get the Google OAuth provider from this package. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap my app component inside this Google OAuth provider. So I'll say Google OAuth provider, and like this. And then we need to pass in a prop here, and that is the client ID here. And the client ID, we just simply copied a couple of seconds inside our package.json file, that is this file here. So let me simply copy this client ID here, and this is the client secret. And you never want to publish your client secret to your front-end applications. So we are simply copying this client secret here, the client ID here, and we'll copy this to this thing here, that is the Google OAuth provider. And that's all what you need to do here. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to my app.jsx file, and just let me simply remove this user state from here, because like it is coming from the Vite default generation. So now we have this thing here, and now what we need to have here is the Google login here. Or we need to import a component called Google login from this package that we just installed. So we'll simply import Google's from React Google OAuth Google, and we'll simply say Google login. So what we can do, we can use this Google login component here. So let me remove this paragraph from here, and we'll simply say Google login like this, simply like this. And we need to provide in two things here, that is the on success event, that is the required thing here, and it provides us with credentials. So credentials or credential response, that would be better here. So credential response, because in the credential response, we will be having the actual credentials. So here for now, let me simply log in the console.log. I don't know why my auto completion is not working properly. So we can say credential response. And then we also need to handle the error here in case there is an error. So we can say on error. And here we would be having an error here. So we can simply log the error. So console.log the error message here, simply like this. So these are the only two required things that you need to pass to this Google login as props. And now what we can do, we can go to our application. And before going to the application, we need to start the application again. So npm run dev. So we have this application running on port 5173 and it is on localhost. And if we go to our application here, that is the suite application, we see that we have this button here that says sign in with Google. And again, you can pass in some props to change in the text here. That is continue with Google, something like that. You can check the props inside the library. I'm not going to waste that time. So if I inspect here, we see that we are getting some kind of an error here, because even if you click on this button here, you see that this is not working for some reason. And if we have a look, we see that that failed to load resource. The server responded with the status code of 403. And this is one of the things that I wanted to show you with this thing or with the development with localhost is that whenever you use 127.0.1, it would give you this error. But instead, if you would have used localhost, then it would work. So if I press enter here, we see that now we do not get that error. So once I click on this sign in with Google, and let me also increase the font size of my console here. So once I click on this sign in with Google, we see that we get this thing here. That is again a pop-up here. And since I'm in full screen, so therefore it is opening it in a new window. But otherwise, you would be simply getting it as a pop-up here inside your this OIT application or your React application. So let me simply choose one of the two test accounts that I added. So let me simply select this account. And now it says that confirm you want to sign into mafiacodes as truly. And that is the name of the application that I provided in my OAuth consent screen. And now let me simply click on confirm. So once we confirm this, that thing is closed. And now we get we are returned by this credential response, which contains the client ID, the credentials, and select by. So this is how you can get the credentials, and this credential is a JSON web token. So what I can do, I can simply copy this thing from here, that is copy string contents, and I can decode it inside jwt.io. So jwt.io, and let me simply paste that token here. That is, I simply copied this credential and I simply pasted it here, and we see that we get all this payload here. That is this payload, which contains the email, whether the email is verified, and name, picture, and so on and so forth. We can close this tab here. What we can do, we can simply get the data, or we can get the payload from another library that is called Juice, so that we can like directly show in the user some message here, or we can change the layout accordingly by displaying it the user name, email, and this profile image. So what we can do, we can again stop the application and we can install one package, that is npm juice, npm ijuice workspace client equal to client. And again, if you're not using workspaces, then simply ignore this tag here, that is workspace client. And it simply means that I'm installing it inside my front-end application. And we see that we have this dependency installed here. And now what I can do, I can decode the JWT from this package. So import something from Juice. And here I can simply get this function here, that is decode JWT. And here I can say const payload equal to, not await, but we can get payload equal to credential response dot credential, because this is an optional value. So firstly, we'll check the credentials. So let me extract out the credential from this credential response. So credential response credential like this. And now we can check for credential. If there are credentials, then we can simply use this thing here, that is decode JWT. And here we can provide in the credential, that is the JWT in itself. And then otherwise the payload would be undefined. If payload, that is if there is payload, then what we can do, we can simply console log the payload here. So payload like this. Otherwise we are not simply doing anything. So if I save this and if I do npm run dev once again, And if I go back to my application and I reload the application, and just ignore this error here because it is like something else, it is coming from some other place. So let me simply click on sign in as truly, or let me select one other account, that is this account here. So as we can see, we get back the decoded JWT here, which contains in the family name, the given name, and the email, as well as the profile image here. So what you can do, you can create some kind of a state inside your React application to store these credentials or these uh, attributes to show the UI accordingly. And you also need to save in the actual credential, that is this JWT, because when we are going to make authenticated request to our Express application, we need to pass this JWT to our backend application to validate this JWT with the Google servers that this is a valid request and this is a valid JWT, and so that you can process your request. So before doing so, I would show you one more thing, that is how to implement the one tap login here. So what we can do is to go back to our React application and we can pass in one more prop here, and that is use one tap as a prop here. So this is the prop I am passing here. And if I save the application, we see that we get this pop-up here. So this looks something like this. That is, we have this one tap sign in. That is, once the application is loaded, we can simply select in the account with which we want to sign in. And as soon as I click on this, let me clear out the console first. And as soon as I click on this email address, it verifies here. And finally, we again get back the credential and the this thing here, this thing. And again, you might be wondering that if you want to get rid of this button, what to do? You can simply use Google login hook. That is, or if you simply want to show in this thing here, that is this one tap login thing. Let me reload the page once again. So if you only want to show this thing here and you do not want to show in the button, so what you can do, you can go back here and you can use Google login hook. That is, use Google one tap login. And here what we can do, we can simply say const login equal to use Google one tap login. And here you need to pass in the functions here, that is the on success and on error. So let me copy these two functions or these two callbacks and let me paste it here. And this should be like this. And then we have in the on error thing here, and this should be like this. So that's all what you need to do. That is this thing here, and we can get rid of this stuff here. That is this thing here. And now as soon as I save the application and I go back here and I reload the page, we see that we are seeing only this thing here and we don't see the button here. So this is again what you can do. And again, if I select the account, we get the similar response back in a moment. So that's all what we have here. Okay, so this is all about this use Google one tap login hook. And now let's see that how do we pass this credentials to our server so that we can validate the credentials and we can send in the response accordingly. So as I've told you already that you need to store this JWT token somewhere as a state variable inside your React application using the context API or using Redux or any other state management library. So what you need to do for each and every request to your backend application or each and every authenticated request to your backend application, you need to pass this as a header or in the body tags, whichever way you want to do. So for this video, what I'm going to do, I'm simply going to copy this thing, that is this credential, and I'm simply going to make a request to my backend application as soon as I receive it inside the on success block, just to make one authenticated request or just to show it to you. So for that, what I need to do, I need to install a couple of things. Firstly, I need to install Axios to my front-end application, that is a client application. So npm I Axios workspace client. And again, if you're not using workspaces, then simply ignore this workspace client from here. And now I need to install one package here inside my server thing, and that is the Google OAuth library to validate the JWT. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to install this package, that is npm I Google Auth library. And this would be installed in workspace server since I'm using workspaces. And if you're not using workspaces, simply omit this workspace server. And I'm insisting on this thing here because otherwise you would say that I have not told you that what this means. So let me install this thing here, and this is installed in the server package here, that is the Google OAuth library. And just ignore this thing here. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a function here inside my Express application. And all those of you who are watching this video must know that how Express works. And if you don't know how to work with Express applications, then I have a very good series about how to work with Express or how to create REST APIs using Express, and I would be linking it here at the very top. So now what I need to do, I need to create a middleware here. So let me call it verify middleware. So we can create an async function here. So async function called verify like this. And now what we need to do here, we need to create a new auth 2 client from this Google OAuth package. So what I'll do, I'll simply say const something equal to require Google Auth library. And here we need to simply import in the OAuth 2 client. And here before this function, because I do not want to create in the OAuth 2 client again and again. So just before this function, what I'll simply say OAuth 2 client. So OAuth 2 client, let's start with a small o, equal to new OAuth 2 client. And here we need to pass in the options, that is the client ID and the client secret. So as you all know that we have this client ID here. So we can copy then this client ID here, and let me go to my app.js file and I can pass in this client ID here. And since it's a tutorial, I'm hard coding it, but in your application, in a production application, you should never be hard coding your client ID and client secrets like this, but instead you should be getting them from an environment variable. And now I need to pass in the client secret. So let me copy in the client secret, and now let's go back to our app.js file, and here we can pass in the client secret simply like this. So let's save this. And now inside the verify middleware, what we need to do, we need to validate the authenticity of this token. So what we can say const ticket equal to await auth to client dot verify ID token. And here we need to verify the ID token. So how do we get the ID token? So we can extract it from the headers, as we can send it from our React application. So what we can say const token equal to, and this verify expects in a request response and next, since it's a middleware. So we can get the request response and next objects here. So we can say request dot headers dot authorization, and then we can get the, or we can call it auth header. So auth header would be like this, and const token would be equal to auth header dot split, and it would all make sense in a moment. We are splitting it with a space, and then we simply need to grab in the first object, because the token that would be passed from our client application would look something like this. That is, let me write it here. So it would be looking something like this. That is, the auth header would be containing a bearer token here. So bearer space some kind of a token here. And so therefore what I've done is this, that I've split it in the auth. This auth header would be looking like this. So what I've done is this, that I've split it in the auth header with a space here. So therefore I'm using a space here, and then I would be getting back an array, and I'm simply getting in the first item of the array, or I mean that the second item of the array, that is this item, and this would contain in the token. So therefore I've used in this thing here. So I would keep this here for reference. So now to verify the ID token, I can simply pass in the options here. So ID token would be this token here. And then we need to pass in the audience. So audience would be this client ID. So again, you need to pass in the client ID. So let me copy this client ID from here. And again, this should be coming from your environment variable. So if the ticket is verified, we can get in the payload. So const payload equal to ticket dot get payload. And now what you can do, you can simply check that if payload, you can simply call in, you can simply attach in the user ID to your app, to your request object. You can simply say rec.user ID. That is, I'm attaching this user ID to my request object, and I would simply say payload user ID, or that would be sub. And we would be simply calling in next from here. That is, go to the next middleware. Otherwise, and again, we would be returning from here. Otherwise, we would be simply sending back a 403 error, that is forbidden or like unauthorized, through create error dot unauthorized, simply like this. So let's save this. Okay, so now we need to use this middleware in any of the protected routes that we want to create. So let's say that we want to create a route here, that is app.get, and this would be a protected route. So I'm calling it protected route, and it can be named as anything, or it can be any route. And here I need to pass in the middleware, that is the verify middleware. And again, we can simply copy this piece of code from here to keep it simple. So awesome, it works for protected route. So protected route, simply like this. So if I save this application, and if I go back to my application, and I'm directly going to my localhost port 4000 before connecting it with the React application. So if I save this, we see that on this this index route, it works. But if I go to the protected route, we should be getting some kind of an error. So we see that we are getting this error, and that is because I expected, because firstly, it is not 100% sure that we are already having an auth header in any request. So what you can do, you can simply check it here, that is if not auth header, that is auth header. So if there is no auth header, what we can do, we can simply call a next with the error is the only parameter. So create error dot unauthorized. And I guess that we, instead of throwing the error here, we can simply call in the next with the unauthorized thing here instead of like throwing in the error, because like I already have the error handler here inside the Express application. That is this thing. That is this thing here. So we can save this application, and if I go back here and if I go to this protected route here, we see that we are getting this error here, that is unauthorized. So now let's try to get this route from our React application so that we can get back a response. So we can go to our React application once again. So app.jsx file, and here what I need to do, once we have the payload, so what we can do, we can make in a request here. So Axios. So I need to import Axios from Axios first. So import Axios from Axios, and I can make in a get request. So axios.get, and here we need to target in the localhost port 4000, that is our backend application, and it should be Axios. So localhost port 4000 / protected, because that is a route we want to call. And here we can pass in some options here, and here we need to pass in the headers, and headers would be the authorization header, and this should be containing in the credential JWT token. So it would contain in the bearer, and then we can pass in the credential here by using this thing here, credential, simply like this. And then we can get in the response from our backend application, and here we can simply log in the response. So console.log response.data. Otherwise, you can catch in the error, and we can simply log in the error. So console.log error.message, simply like this. And did I do something wrong? Maybe not. All right, let's keep it simple. So error would be equal to this thing here. So let's save it. And if I did everything correctly, then this should be working fine. So let's go back and let's reload the page, and let's try to log in with one of the users here. And as soon as we log in, we hit the protected route, and we see that we are getting this message here. That is awesome. It works for protected route. So it means that we are like validating the JWT token on the backend. So now let me show you that if you do not pass in a valid JWT token, what would happen. So let's say that instead of the actual credential, we pass in some gibberish value by adding in some gibberish item here. And if I save the application, so let's try to hit this route once again. So let me reload the application once again. And if I click on this thing here, we should be getting some kind of an error here, and we get that error connection refused. So if we have a look at the terminal here, if we see the output here, so if I scroll at the very bottom, we see that we get this error here that says that invalid token signature. So which means that our authentication is working on our backend server. That is, this token is not valid. And if you want to like not see the error here, but instead send back in a response, so what you can do, you can wrap this thing in a try catch. So try catch, and you can try everything, and finally you can simply catch the error, and you can simply call in next with the error as the only parameter, so that the error is like responded back to the client. So let me stop the application once again, and let me start once again. So npm run dev. So let's go back and let me reload the application once again, and let's sign in, try to sign in with this user, and we should be getting an error here. We see that we simply get this error here, that is request filled with status code 500. And you can simply check in the data also, that is what data is sent here. So invalid token signature here, that is this token is not valid. So guys, this is all about this video. This is how you use Google Sign-In inside a React application with Express as the backend for authentication purposes. If you have liked the video, do hit the like button. And if you're still watching till the end, please do hit the subscribe button. It means a lot to me. So thank you. Bye-bye. Tata. Take care and have a good day and have a great day.